My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, a podcast where I, your host, try to give you some tips on how you can explain all this weird, wild, crazy conspiracy stuff to the people you love most. Because that's what I've been trying to do for the past 10 years with no success.
I've been telling everybody that our government is shady, but every time I do, my family thinks I'm crazy. The hollow earth, UFOs, aliens invading, fluoride in the water, they swear skies daily. When I talk about these things, they think I'm crazy. There's no escaping anymore the evil that we're facing. Illuminati mind control, they're sacrificing babies. The end of days, but anyways, my family thinks I'm crazy.
What, they don't want to listen to you?
No, they don't want to listen. They don't want to hear it. They're just like, oh, here we go, Mark. Off again with your...
Mark being Mark again.
Yeah. So, that's the thing about podcasts is when you're on the air, and it's like therapy, If I can't talk to my family about this stuff, I'll talk to you, Matt, and all our listeners.
You just tell your whole podcast.
Yeah. So who are we talking about today, Matt?
They think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. My family thinks that I'm crazy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Today is a different format. We've got myself swapcasting, and I decided to also include my first guest appearance on Down the Rabbit Hole podcast with Mitch and Tyler. Really cool dudes. They've had me on their show once before for episode 39, and then recently we did a swapcast together, so I decided to put them both together on this feed. And really awesome dudes. They've interviewed a bunch of great guests. Generation Z, they got Ari Aselin, Jack Allen, Odd Man, Matt Landman. Let's see, I've been on this show twice. They've had Micah Dank on 3 times, Richard Willett, the New York Patriot, David Weiss, all kinds of great guests. So check them out, show them some love, and enjoy these conversations with Mitch and Tyler. Thank you for listening to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Show us some love on Patreon. And, by the way, if you're in the Pittsburgh area, go down to Jimmy K's Bar and Grill. Jimmy K's, that's where Tyler and Mitch hang out. That bar sponsors their podcast. How cool is that? We gotta find one of those for my local area, huh? All right, folks. More in store. If you want to join the community, go on to Telegram. We got the Telegram now. Join in the Telegram. It's really fun over there. I'm always looking at my notifications and checking messages. Leave me a message. If you want to be heard on the show, go to podinbox.com/MFTIC and leave us a message. Go over to the Patreon. We got a bunch of really awesome patrons. Shout out to Jacob Arthur, who just joined the Patreon today. We have Justin Ruiz, has been a Patreon for the past month here. We got a lot of really awesome folks in the club. So come on over. Patreon.com/MFTIC. Enjoy this episode with Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. Mitch and Tyler. Peace.
Welcome to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, and I am swapcasting with my homies.
Hell yeah.
What's up, guys? Introduce yourselves. Tell the listeners of the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast what podcast they are also listening to today.
Awesome. This is my boy Tyler T. Saint.
Tyler Saint, yep. We're from the Down the Rabbit Hole podcast.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was honored to be a guest on their show once, and now here they are joining us on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy feed for a swapcast. And if you're listening from the Down the Rabbit Hole feed already, nice to meet you.
Yes,
this is the awesome thing about doing a swapcast. But yeah, guys, I'm excited to get into it today. I'm just rolling something up right now. I'm coming off of a little trip with my better half towards the ley line. We've been tracking this ley line here in Connecticut. Have you guys looked into ley lines at all?
I have a little bit. I think there is one that goes like just over Pittsburgh, which is where we're at. We're about half an hour north of Pittsburgh up the Ohio River. And I think there's one that goes right through there. Yeah.
I think you guys are on the 41st parallel.
Yeah, it's the 40th parallel.
Can you get me my map, Tara, on the board there?
Yeah, Pittsburgh's right about the 40th, and I know your boy Michael Wan talks a lot about the 40th parallel.
Parallel. Susquehanna River Legends. Yeah,
I just started a new podcast with them called Your Handbook for the Apocalypse.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, you guys are on this map. Hold on, let me get to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, we're over on the western side of PA. He's focused on the eastern side. And we're doing good, trying to enjoy each day, living in this ever-expanding now, as you like to say, one day at a time.
Dude, you guys are definitely on some sort of alignment, but it's not the 41st parallel. I got that wrong. But you're right in between the 41st and the 40th parallel.
Right, yeah.
Which, since you brought up Michael Wan, you'll know that his whole book is called The Rights of the 40th Parallel, because the 40th parallel goes through Lancaster, goes through Millersville, goes through Philly. So, yeah, very interesting stuff. Have you guys been out to that side of Pennsylvania much?
I only have been out there twice. I've only been in Philly once, and then I was up near Lancaster area touring colleges back when I was in high school. But it's beautiful over there, man. There's rolling hills, and it's just, you can really feel the energy. Yeah, we went down there at the beginning of August, but really, Mike and all of his work has inspired me to go and look into, my own backyard and check out Connecticut, which is why we went on that trip today. I have another map over here that I drew out myself last night where we found the ley line, and it's not easy because there's only like one book that talks about this ley line, and we just synchronistically happened to find it on the ley line in Woodstock, New York, which is pretty much where the ley line goes through. But yeah, if you guys want to check this out, I'll probably put this on my Patreon for people to see. So if you're listening, check it out. I'll try to get that as close as I can. But that's where the ley line goes through.
Wow.
Right? Through the sort of like, it makes like the southwest corner of Connecticut kind of like its own piece, Right. But it goes through 15 different towns. That's the writing on there. And yeah, it's amazing how many interesting spots happen to line up on that line. There's, to start with, Montauk, which that's a big you guys one. Know for sure what's going on at Montauk, and Montauk is on the 41st parallel. So that's the beginning of it. Then it goes into Westbrook, Connecticut, across a little harbor called Indiantown Harbor. And then it goes in to a town called Killingsworth. And then from there, it goes through a bunch of different towns all the way up to where we were today, which is Kent Falls State Park. And what's cool about this ley line is where we were at on the ley line, it's a gorge and waterfalls. So, I mean, not only was there the ley line energy, but there was definitely that natural energy there. So as far as research goes, I mean, there's certain books that I've found that have kind of shown me this stuff, and it's really interesting because it seems like, nobody else other than this one author has really looked into this ley line at all. What author is that? Because I read The View Over Atlantis, and they kind of touched on it a little bit there, but what are you talking about? So specifically, when it comes to the Hammonasset line, this guy, Glenn Kreisberg, his book is the only one I can find that talks about the Hammonasset line. I have it right here. And yeah, so his book, Spirits and Stone, it doesn't just talk about the Hammonasset line. It talks about a bunch of different megalithic alignments, specifically in the Northeast. But he makes the connection that the Hammonasset line is like a mirror to the constellation Draco. So I'm like, this is basically, the threads, like they're going in different directions. And right now, I don't know what it all means. I'm not an expert in this, but as I'm learning and researching, I have all the threads, and, talking about it on the podcast is good way to remember it. You know,
sure.
That's one way to keep a record of it.
A little
right?
bit of repetition, yeah. The more times, it'll stick better. But I was going to ask you, are you and your significant other still searching for that bus to make it a mobile podcast spot and travel around? How's that going for you?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. That's definitely in the dream board, so to speak.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did find a bus that looked like it would have worked and ended up having more problems than we thought. So no, not quite yet, but yeah, definitely something we'd like to do for sure.
Yeah, I bought a camper. It's like a mini motor home in the spring, and I've been trying to convince Tyler to hop on the road with me, but I also have a girlfriend that has a steady job, and it's going to be a little hard for us to just hit the road for a while, but that is the plan for us too, to get in there and travel around and do podcasts from all over.
Yeah, let me ask you then, is there anything in your own backyard as far as Pittsburgh goes, like, and your specific hometown, like any strange stuff going on that you've seen there?
I wouldn't say anything strange as far as like energetically or like, you know, as far as ley lines are involved. But I mean, there's a lot of history in the area.
We got Johnny No Face.
We do have Johnny No Face. He is.
What's that about? What's Johnny No Face?
Some guy back in the day got electrocuted and like burned his face off, and to like hide from people, he would just walk around at night. So it's kind of like a local urban legend.
Yeah.
People would be driving around at night and see this guy with like a burn off face, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's Johnny No Face!" But that's not really mystical or anything. It's just one of our little urban legends around here.
With the mobile podcasting site, we were thinking about more of traveling around the country, checking things out like the Georgia Guidestones or you know, a lot of cool things like that, and just basing our podcasts off of where we are at that specific time.
Right.
Doing deep dives, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. The Georgia Guidestones came up with Charlie Robinson when he was on the show last week. He was talking about how the Georgia Guidestones call for like 500 million people to be on the earth, which is, you know, 10% of what there is now. And then you think about what they're saying with the vax, where it's like, 90% of people have to get it.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
seems a little bit, you know, eerie. But I don't know. I think that's why I really love looking into this ley line, because it's an indication of where we used to be a long, long time ago, you know, like it's a look into the past. And I think, you know, at a time like now where things are so, you know, wild, it's kind of a relief to go into the past and think about what it was like back then and how we can tap into that energy now. And I don't know. I mean, I see the fear and whatnot, but I got to ask you, being in Pittsburgh, like, is anybody wearing a mask out there? I've driven through Pittsburgh before. It seems pretty, have a lot of common sense there.
Yeah, well, we're in a suburb, and it's Trump's America around here. Like, no one does anything in our little town. If you get closer to the city, I'm sure you'll see people walking around with masks just because it's a city, and you'll have more left-leaning people in the cities. But once you get 15 minutes out, no one's doing any of that.
Right on. Yeah, that's good to know. I think people around here are a little crazy about the masks still, which is sad, but it's still nice to be able to go into a store without one, even though there's a bunch of people wearing them. I don't know how strict it is over there, but it's pretty lax in Connecticut.
Yeah, no one's going to say anything here if you walk in without a mask. They don't care.
Yeah, but I mean, in a kind of selfish way, like the lockdowns were really good for guys like us who want to get out on the road and travel, because
less people traveling.
There's no traffic. Nobody goes on vacation. You know, all the things stop.
I completely agree. I was going to say, there is one spot that's like only 45 minutes away with us, the Snake Mound in Ohio.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was only there once, and it was just a stop on a trip. I was only there for maybe half an hour, but it was cool to see. I think it's a little bit more impressive if you get the aerial shot. But yeah, that's one of the more ancient sites that's around us.
Yeah. So you've been there. You were there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you remember a particular feeling or some sort of sense of something while you were there? Like any emotions or thoughts that came over you?
A little bit. It's it was kind of a quiet place, you know, kind of like if you stepped into a forest with no one around, how you can just kind of hear the nature and there's no noise from, you know, cars driving by or any of that. I kind of got that kind of feel where you didn't really hear anything. There's some people walking around reading the plaques and doing stuff like that, but there wasn't any city noise, you know. It was kind of more of a natural feel.
Yeah, so, very ambient and peaceful.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
There was a similar feeling today when we were checking out the ley line, you know, and especially this one part. It wasn't on the ley line, but it was on the way there. And that's what's so cool is, like, you know, you can make a trip to go to Serpent Mound and, you know, go there and see it and whatever. But it's the journey that is important, you know. And right. I think finding this ley line was so fun because on the way there we found the Shagticoke Reservoir, which is a reservation, which is where, you know, these Native Americans who got kicked out of Connecticut, you know, when the colonists came in, they all fled, and, you know, it was a bad situation. There's wars, and they all gathered up in this one corner of the state. And I read about this a couple weeks ago, and then, you know, just as a matter of coincidence, we drive down this road on our way to this ley line, and boom, there's the reservation that I was, like, reading about less than a week ago. So that's the side of it that's cool. Yeah, like when things come up like that, it's an indication that, like, oh, maybe we're on the right track. But
right.
Yeah, I'm also, like, trying to take the podcast in that direction to, like, find some folks who do live on a reservation and interview them, get their experience, and instead of just assuming, you know, what Native Americans think of these things, you know.
For sure.
So, Mark, I wanted to ask you, have you visited any other ley line locations other than the one in your backyard in Connecticut?
Well, when I went down to Philadelphia, you know, partly to see Michael Wan, but the other person I visited when I was down there in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia specifically, was Ross Ben.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know.
Cool, man, yeah.
Yeah, very, very in tune. You know, he's written multiple books, done the Higher Side Chats a bunch. Yeah. People know him from there, but he's a really cool guy. You know, it was an honor to meet him. And obviously Mike hooked that up. And then he gave us a little tour. And my girlfriend and I seem to be like a magnet for animals because he was just sitting like 5 feet away from us, and a little, like, toad starts hopping in between us. And he's like, oh, man, you never see them around this time of year. And that's been happening for months where animals just come around us. But either way, side note, and he took us to this mound in Wissahickon Creek. So I would guess that there's a ley line there. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But Philadelphia definitely is on the ley line grid. I mean, that's for sure. So, yeah, there. And then Washington, D.C. I went to Washington, D.C. last year.
I'll be there this weekend.
And that was pretty crazy.
So when you visit these spots, like these high energy spots on ley lines, do you ever bring anything with you, like crystals or quartz or anything to help maybe, you know, harness that energy and take it home with you? Have you ever tried anything like that?
Yeah, today I tried it. I mean, every other time I've been to ley line, it was by accident, or maybe I just didn't realize it and felt the energy. I always have crystals in my car, at least. I mean, There's some in my car pretty much all the time. But no, I think intention is all you need to bring with you.
No doubt.
You know, so if you have something to do with the crystals, then yeah, bring them with you to the ley line. If you want to leave them behind as an offering, or you want to hold them with you while you sort of feel the energy. But it's a really personal thing, and it's also something that, you know, maybe it isn't for everybody, because it might have an effect on you that you're not conscious of. And then that's going to maybe color your experience, and you'll be like, well, it was cool, but I didn't feel anything. Even though, like, 10, maybe 5 weeks later, something else happens, and then something else. And then next thing you know, 5 years later, you're like, whoa, if I never went to that mound, or if I never went to that ley line, I wouldn't be here right now. And it's usually a good feeling, you know? So I think these spots have a potential to change your life. So if that means bringing crystals with you to change your life, so be it. Some people, find power in other objects, but crystals, I think, inherently have energy. People know that. I don't want to be the expert on that, but you could find someone to tell you about that for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I think there's sometimes in the moment, it's hard to see the signs that this might be an important experience or an important sign for you. And like you said, later on, it might reveal itself to you. And you just got to, you're always preaching on your podcast, the searching for the ever expanding now. How do I want to put
and you
this?
have to pay attention to the synchronicities too. It's just like signs that are going to show you.
The more you get used to it, the better you are at seeing them and understanding that, okay, that's a little sign, that's a little omen,
Well, and also it's like synchronicity is really like, what's the point? There has to be a point. Like, I think synchronicities happen to people all the time, and they don't recognize them because they're not living in alignment with who they are, whatever their purpose is.
Right.
So maybe those synchronicities, because you're, working this job that's not what you really want to be doing, maybe the synchronicities at that point in your life are going to be pulling you to do things that expand your reality and maybe open up those opportunities that would create a reality that you're more suitable to live in, right? And I think part of being aware of them is when you're aware that, I want to change my reality. Then you start to see and act on it, right? I think that's kind of the message I'm getting at with the synchro-mystic exploration of the ever-expanding now, because
I love it.
The expanding now is happening before you every moment. It's right now. Even whenever someone listens to this in the future, it's now. Right. So that's it. And when you realize that's all it is, then you can have a better grasp on where you're going. And what I mean by that is, if you can feel the way you want to feel wherever, whether it's you're in a Ferrari or a mansion, the superficial cliche stuff, or whether it's something simple like, having a relationship or having a better job or having, a house that, a better house, or whatever it may be that you want to bring into your reality, you have to feel the way you would feel when you have it now. Otherwise, you're not going to make it there, right? That's kind of, and then it gets into like crazy territory when you start setting that type of intention towards figuring out a ley line or figuring out UFOs or finding Sasquatch. You know what I mean? Like any of these odd pursuits, they seem like, yeah, okay, that's crazy. You're never going to get any results there. But if that's part of your purpose and your alignment to go out and explore the unknown or the fringe or the paranormal, you're going to see synchronicities that lead you to maybe see a UFO one day or see, whatever it is. So I think that's kind of the fun of the scene, is like, what is there to be seen? Obviously we could play around with that word a lot, but, we're really just talking about something that people have been doing forever. It's just culture. Culture is shaping your reality, and most people aren't aware of it. And that's the real problem with where we're at right now, is a lot of people end up feeling hopeless and depressed, and then they go to the, mommy's little helper pills and all the, comfort from the nanny state, instead of taking a rite of passage and, facing their fears, or, having a near-death experience, which is what some people, do to wake up and see the world for what it really is. But I think now we don't even have to go to those extreme levels. It's a matter of opening yourself up to it, and that's the other side of it. It's like, we don't know what's happening. We're just open to what could come.
I completely agree. It's all about your mindset. You have to put yourself in that reality, and then the law of attraction, whatever you're putting out in the universe, it'll come back to you, And
also being a true human being. Like, this is something that I didn't make up. It's not something that I came up with. This is something that someone told me when I was 18, 19, and it all had to do with this red hawk feather that I found. And I take it to my mentor, Amos, who I probably talked about with you guys the first time I was with you.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about him before, too.
Right. And, he told me, he's like, oh, you found this, this was a sign. I prayed for you and found, that it was true. You're a true human being, paraphrasing there. But in other words, that moment, it was like, oh, okay, this person recognizes that I care about everybody. And that's why I'm interested in this stuff, and I think that sounds a little crazy or deep, maybe to people who don't, maybe I'm not explaining it in the best ways, but I think altruism and loving everybody and really trying to understand what that means on a realistic level, how you can help the world and make a positive impact on the world. That is the place you need to be in order to have the best results with the law of attraction, because the universe helps those who helps others. I mean, and everything you put out comes back to you threefold, right?
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, these are all things that people have been talking about in books and seminars, and, people have probably made lots of money selling stuff to people. But I think it's pretty common sense nowadays that it works. And that's part of what I want to do on the show, is explore it and show people how real it could be and how I've changed my life for the better. And it wasn't like a quick fix that I'm going to sell you in 90 minutes. It's like, no, it's a part of who I am, and like dig into who you are. And like you said, Tyler, recognizing the synchronicities. I think more importantly, you need to recognize the story and how your life is a story, and everyone else is living their own story. And some of our stories interweave into other people's stories, but all of those stories make up a larger story. And in the past, there was a story, and in the future, there's a story, and you can decide to look into whichever one you want. But, don't lose track of the story that is your life, because you're the only one who's going to write it. So that's kind of the law of attraction to me.
So
I love it.
So, you were talking about culture and how culture is just I don't remember how you phrased it, but it was like a way of living and explaining the world that we live in.
Right.
Like, as this intertwines with energetic ley lines and stuff, do you think ancient cultures had a way better understanding of this than what we have now? And do you think that there's like maybe a deliberate like burying of this just natural knowledge that humans have?
Yeah. I think most people that would listen to a show like this have probably had that suspicion that there's something going on, forbidden knowledge, hidden knowledge, esoteric knowledge.
Absolutely.
All of those words, like cult, they just mean hidden. And that's because, to powerful people comes a lot of responsibility. And I think in the past, that responsibility wasn't given so freely. So they had to hide the information. And then the people who were holding the information became irresponsible and created the world we're in now, So, yeah, I think ancient cultures were much wiser, and we're living in some sort of post-cataclysmic, version of whatever that was, where, the empires as we know them have held on to some sort of technology from that ancient time and have been, really unable to recreate it because they maybe lack the understanding of how to really tap into it. I don't know for sure. But I think there's technology at play that proves that where we're at now technologically is not the most advanced we've ever been.
Right.
Right.
There's a better way to do
consider
things.
the megaliths and stuff
that are built on ley lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're especially built
that
on
could
ley
be
lines.
That could be it. But again, it's like maybe this is part of what I'm looking to find out. Can't say I have the answers to answer that, but that's what I've heard a lot of people say, and I have to go to the ley line myself to find out. So like today, I didn't see any megaliths. I saw a lot of cool stones. I saw a lot of big stones. I saw things that seemed out of place. But when you consider, what's going on, this ley line being sort of like a highway for animals and people and
energy,
spirits, who knows? Everything could be traveling along this line. Why else would they do the Montauk experiment at that one spot? Because it connected to the Hammonasset line and the 41st parallel and maybe the Bermuda Triangle or whatever else, who knows? And Draco too, the Dragon constellation. So there's a lot at play with the ley line. I think the fact is we're dealing with an energetic world. And
absolutely,
to answer your question about are they hiding it from us? Yeah, because they want to be able to, whoever they is, have access to the energy in that monopoly fashion that you see with like the diamond company or the oil companies or the media company. Like, look at any
the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, they're if they're not monopolized outright, then they have a conglomerate of companies that work together to fix the prices. And Charlie was just on the show talking about how these hospitals charge 400 times what it costs. So they pay $2 for a bag of saline salt water, and then they charge you $800 for to administer that.
Yeah, that's
when
absolutely
you go to the
insane.
hospital. So it's this is the kind of thing that happens when these groups get together and hold any kind of power over anybody, whether it's like the power to give you your health back, even if it only hurts you more and more and more and more until you realize like, oh my God, it's too late. I don't know if people even realize it, because it seems like by the time the hospital really gets done with you, your mind's gone too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to turn this into pharmacy show. We love those guys. They're so great.
We love those guys.
Well, I mean, in terms of like hoarding knowledge and stuff like that, it's a perfect explanation for the reason why they're secret societies. It's like they have the knowledge of the past, and then they hoard it and pass it down through generations so that they know, but the public can't know. And it's just a huge mechanism of control.
Yeah, and it used to work in a way that benefited everyone. I think it used to work in a way where, only the people who seemed like they would be a good fit for it would then join and become an adept. First you're a neophyte, then whatever other stages.
And this is more than just knowledge of like the energy of the earth with ley lines and et cetera. It's things like alchemy, things like what used to be called magic, all those type of things. So I mean, it goes in a lot of different avenues.
Well, one thing that Ross Ben talks about in his book is and Sam Tripoli actually, as a matter of fact, has been saying it a lot on Tinfoil Hat. Not that they
who's that guy
were in sync, but this whole thing of inversion, how they flip things, right? And Sam says it all the time, but what Ross said in the beginning of his book, Great Mystery Philadelphia, is that they were inverting the divine right to rule from the Moors to the, white people, for lack of a better word.
Right.
I think they were talking about the Slavs, which is why they use that word slave to refer to indentured servants who happen to be
interesting.
black.
That is where slave originated. The Slavics were the first slaves.
Wow.
Right. So, and that was because of the Roman Empire, and then they flipped it and then applied that term to who were normally called Moors at that time, the Moorish people, aka people from Africa. So, this is a process of alchemy that they do in language and culture and society to flip these things. And if you go to certain places in Switzerland, they have all these, you've seen the European flags. They have them a lot in Connecticut, actually. It's weird. But, they'll have emblems, family crests and emblems, right? Well, in Europe, a lot in Switzerland and places that used to be Prussia have these statues of what are called Moor's heads. And they're essentially just a depiction of a black man, right? And there's a Saint Maurice, who was a black man from Egypt who eventually, or according to history, stopped a sacrifice because he was like, no, I'm a Christian, I wouldn't do that. Because the Roman Empire was using this legion from Egypt to fight their war in France, and the Romans were like, you got to kill all these Christians for this pagan sacrifice. And Saint Maurice was like, no, I'm a Christian. I'll never do that. And he was canonized as a saint. Anyways, long story short, I'm kind of going all over the place here, but people can get this straight scoop from Ross Ben. But yeah, it's a process of inversion. Like, though that shows you that like African people have had way more interesting and in-depth history in Europe than just being slaves. Like, we're told in America, like, oh yeah, African people were in Africa, that's it, they never left, and then we went there, we grabbed them and we brought them to America and they helped us build America. Isn't it great? That's the kind of story we get. But when you look into history, you see that, no. There were huge kingdoms in Africa for thousands of years. And then Europe kind of came about and started taking over. So you see this inversion happen where, who were once Egyptian rulers, the divine right to rule, now it's the European divine right to rule. So this is the kind of alchemy inversion process that went on in Europe, and then they tried to apply it here in America with the indigenous people.
Right.
Now, we're bringing up alchemy a lot, and I know a lot of my normie listeners, as soon as you say alchemy, all they think about is transmuting lesser metals into gold, when in reality there's many branches of alchemy. And I've heard you've been doing a little digging into alchemy. Do you want to maybe explain to the people what the other forms of alchemy are, or how it can be more than just a chemical process of turning metals into gold?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, so people tend to think of it as like a, magical, Harry Potter, wizards, and like people who weren't in society were doing this stuff. No,
Yeah, Isaac Newton practiced alchemy.
Yeah, Johann Kepler, like all these people that were making scientific breakthroughs, they were practicing alchemy too. And the first governor of the Connecticut colony was an alchemist. His name was John Winthrop Jr. or John Winthrop the Younger. And, they did a lot of alchemical things like creating ironworks, these furnaces that would take ore and burn it and turn it into iron, melt certain minerals, which at that time, that seemed like magic. You go out into a mountain, you find the right type of rock, bring it to a furnace, put it on fire, and then you have iron, which you can then make a knife or a sword or whatever you want with. I mean, that's magic in those terms, in those times. So we have to understand the context through which alchemy used to be understood. You actually can change things, one thing to another. It's just we call that material science now. We don't call it alchemy, right? So the same people that were doing these types of chemistry, material science experiments were also obviously very interested in turning anything they could into gold, because gold is the most valuable substance. And yes, there is information online where people say like, yeah, you can like make monoatomic gold, and like there are ways to use like the electromagnetic physics of the earth, not the materialism physics that we get from school. We're talking about ether physics. We're talking about the electro universe. That in that paradigm, maybe that exists. I don't know. Not the expert to talk to here on that. But, in a broader sense, alchemy was just magic. Like everything from exorcism to tarot card reading could have fallen under the realm of alchemy. The word alchemy, alchemet, chemet being the old word for Egypt. So these are just the, magical arts of the old world. And one of those things is changing the landscape and, doing this type of alchemy that creates a country from thin air.
Mm-hmm. I know early alchemists used to have like 3 goals, and one was, turning metals into gold. The other was creating an elixir of life, something that could cure all diseases and immortality, exactly. And there was also a branch that kind of took those beliefs and made it into, they wanted to perfect the human body and the human soul and make those perfect. And that kind of gets into this new age of Aquarius where our consciousness is rising, and I feel like they were just trying to raise their consciousness enough to maybe become a higher dimensional being in the next life or something, you know?
Right. Well, I think, and I'm sorry, I feel like I maybe didn't answer your question.
Oh, no, you're good.
But no, it's okay. I'll answer it now. So I think, alchemy really comprises of exactly what you're talking about. People get hung up on that metaphor of lead to gold, but
right.
That's exactly what it is. Although there are people who have tried to turn lead to gold, that is intended, from my perspective, to be a metaphor for transmuting your consciousness from one of like physical reality, stuck to material things, only thinking that this is the one life you have, to gold, which is a metaphor for enlightenment, illumination, or maybe even a connection with a higher power.
Exactly.
And in the old days, the mystery schools or secret societies would do sort of like a induced near-death experience to get people to awaken to the fact that they are not their human body and they have a soul outside of that. And then when you can understand that, you'll understand that, like, oh, okay, alchemy is taking the soul that I have right now and perfecting it, making it better, improving upon it, so that in the long run, I can achieve a sense of immortality, because I'll be conscious of this lifetime and then the bridge between this lifetime and my next incarnation. Because when you have that near-death experience, you see that, oh, I am not, just this body I'm in, a whole being that has many, many lifetimes of experience, and I chose to come in this body. And, I've only intuited that. It's a lot of stuff I've heard and learned and seen from others, and it resonates with me. And I think that's because at some point along my journey, I learned how to listen to my heart. That's it. And I think everybody can do it. Everybody can do it. They can listen to their heart. They listen to their intuition, trust their heart, trust their intuition, and let it guide you to understand things. And don't be afraid to be wrong. That's the other thing. Because when you're too harsh of a critic on yourself, you stop yourself from getting, as far as you could go. So I think that was something that, for me, just having fun and learning about this stuff, which felt like the opposite of school because there's no pressure. I just learn at my own pace and like pick up a book, read as much as I want, put it down, never pick it up again if I don't want to, you know? And I think that's part of trusting your heart, your intuition, and getting along in life, the way.
That's something that would maybe bother me. Once I start something, I have this overwhelming urge to finish it. So unless it's only like the first 5 or 10 pages of a book, if I get halfway through a book, I have to finish that thing, man. I don't know, it's like a Sheldon Cooper little thing I got. But I loved what you're saying about immortality. It's not this body is going to be immortal. You realize that your soul is immortal. It will live on. And I was real into that shit in college. I got a tattoo of the Philosopher's Stone on me and the Flower of Life with a Merkaba and a Caduceus on my back with my chakras and everything. So I went down like this Hermeticism rabbit hole in college, and a lot of alchemy shown in Hermeticism, how it's just, how do I want to put this? Your life is more than this life. It's your soul will live on. You've had past lives, and what you're trying to do is take steps forward. You're trying to increase your karma instead of putting bad karma and energy out there. You're trying to get to a higher vibrational frequency,
Right. And that might not be everybody's path either. I don't know if everybody comes here awake to that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of like navigating this life, is when you get to that higher vibration from where you were, yourself being the perspective on what is higher, because you don't want to compare yourself to others. You don't want to get into spirituality and then like look at a guru and be like, oh, I'll never be good at this, like maybe that might be your path to be that strict and disciplined, but don't be hard on yourself to learn. I think that's part of it. It's like everybody's on their own path, and not everybody's meant to wake up. I think some people come into this life to have a totally 3D experience and not interact with the 4D more than like, oh, I had a nightmare, and then that's it. Like people, and it sounds sad from the perspective that we have of like, oh, wow, dreams are fascinating. Dreams are, but maybe it's like, blue pill in that sense of like, oh, bliss, it's better not to know.
Ignorance is bliss. Yeah, exactly.
Where you kind of can just like rest easy maybe, but I rest easy even knowing the truth of like the red pills and stuff. I don't get bogged down with the black pill cool guy shit,
Me neither.
I think it's all about like, again, taking it easy at your own pace, not being too critical, and following your heart, because your heart's going to show you the truth. I mean, and your truth might be different than someone else's. I think that's part of karma too. It's not just like, oh, if you do good things come back to you, or bad things, and then bad things happen to you. It's like your karma is who you are. It's how your life's going to play out. And if you do one thing, like let's say I open this book and I read the first line, and do you mean to tell me you could have taken your head? This is a comedy book. Forget about it. But
bad example.
My point, that one sentence could have changed somebody's whole day, and then maybe even their life in a way, it just like your life, right? One of those books in the back of your shelf. So there's that butterfly effect that's like looming on the horizon at any moment. You just got to be able to seize it, take it, grasp it.
So I'm curious, Mark, do you think that, as we were talking about, everybody's on their own plane of consciousness. Do you think that there are some people in this world that are just NPCs?
Well, that might be what I just described with like the person who never wakes up to the higher. But I don't really like to think in terms of like a computer simulated reality. I like the metaphor of like a holographic simulation, but no, I don't think anybody's like an NPC, because that to me implies that they have no chance of waking up, and I don't think that's true. Maybe there's people who are like, their fate, they're doomed or something, whatever. Like there's no hope for them because of something they did in the now. But I don't think. No, I don't believe in the NPCs. It's definitely like a convenient metaphor for where we're at. But I do think that in a way it's deceptive, and it gets people to think into these transhumanist terms of like, oh, everything's a simulation. Computers are normal too, which is true. Everything's made from, natural parts. Even plastic comes from, oil in the ground. But in a sense, there's like the bioorganic reality that we are a part of that nourishes us and supports us. And then there's this cold steel, metal, electronic reality that has smog and affects our auras and, gives us headaches. And
EMF
keeps us
radiation, shit like that.
Yeah, there's clearly like a toxifying effect. I mean, it's just common sense. You can tell people are generally unhealthy, especially people that spend a lot of time in front of a screen, whether it's television, phone, or computer. And I'm not a saint. I'm on a podcast right now looking at a screen, So we all have to have a balance. But as far as NPCs goes, I think if you make the choice to totally commit to the Matrix full force and you're just in it, then I'll call you an NPC. But I think there was a point in that person's life when, they could have taken a left turn towards not being an NPC.
Right. They just kind of assimilate into that lifestyle.
Right. It's not implying that they don't have a soul or anything. It's just that they are completely asleep and they don't even have any inkling or any want to wake up, Well,
and I think that's part of like the incessant, prevalence of alcohol everywhere, and like not that alcohol's per se bad as a chemical. I think there were times when people brewed alcohol that had like an enlightening effect the same way cannabis might. But nowadays there's like, fluoride in beer. There's all kinds of like concentrated forms of alcohol, like hard liquors that are,
processed sugars and
I think that just takes us out of conscious reality. You know, plants have us, you know, a little bit more in touch with our nervous system, our psychic side. That's my perspective and my experience. That might not be true for everybody, but I would recommend plants. Alcohol, like I said, it used to be a plant. Now it's so like toxified, it seems, that it adds to this general unconsciousness that, you know, takes people out of the now, the ever expanding now, but also maybe blinds them from seeing that opportunity to taste something better, you know, or not taste, but achieve something spiritually that they couldn't. And, you know, I'm not an expert on any of that, so I don't mean to poke at anybody who has an alcohol problem.
We don't claim to be experts on anything either.
But I think that's like a sign of the times. There's many others, you know, that's just one example of it. But yeah, I would say, like, you know, people's addiction to their phones, that definitely makes them an NPC for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This guy hitting his little Nick stick here, I hate it, man.
Oh, the robo smoke.
Yeah. That shit ain't good.
Yeah, we're trying to cut down on vices over here, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah, my thing is blunts, but at least those grew out of the ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
I used to be a big blunt guy until a couple months ago when something happened. But if I was smoking weed, it would always be in a blunt. There's no better way to smoke it.
It is the best way.
You gotta move out of PA, bro.
I know. I'm on a little bit of a probation right now for my activities on January 6th, but it's okay. Right. Yeah, that'll be in the past eventually, and I'm focusing on the now, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad I avoided that whole thing. I think that's part of it, is like the political back and forth, you know. It's the Hegelian dialect that they're trying to push us into to get us to fight with each other. You know, Sam says it all the time.
Yeah, well, if I'm not mistaken, man, it wasn't necessarily about the politics for you. It was more about the spectacle and just being there for the historic moment that you know was going to happen.
Yeah, and I was just trying to get some content for the podcast and everything. People love talking geopolitics, and like you said, I am totally against the whole right versus left paradigm where it's just nothing ever gets achieved. They're always just saying, well, this is it, and just constant arguing. I hate that, but
to a certain extent, man, it is fun though. You know, I understand why people like to talk about it.
I only say that because I had the opportunity to go. Like, a bunch of people invited me, and I'm like, oh man, like my heart goes out to you, bro, because that sucks. You know, now you got to deal with something that you probably wouldn't have. But I get it. Yeah, definitely worth a shot.
Right, getting
some content. But yeah, my buddy Alex Stein on the Conspiracy Castle podcast is always doing awesome stuff like that. He's always getting, you know, sticking his nose in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just not, I don't know. I used to have more instinct to do that, but lately I've gotten a lot more chill about that kind of stuff.
That's probably for the best. I feel like I was just a little bit too rowdy. And I mean, we had no intention of entering any buildings or anything when we went down there. We just went for the Stop the Steal election rally and see what was going on, and one thing led to another, and we were inside the Capitol building, you know, but it happens.
Well, I went to a climate change march, so boy, do I regret that.
Yeah. Are you totally off the climate change wagon now? Because some people are like...
yeah. I mean, I realized that it's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't, know about conspiracies back then. I just was a little more naive and felt like, you know, I was a part of something that was for the better, but no, man, that was totally, in a way, a big psyop.
Yeah, we just had Matt Landman on the pod a couple weeks ago talking about geoengineering, and that's the real problem, you know.
Yeah.
Us driving our cars around is not having a super great effect on the atmosphere. It's the HARP ionosphere heaters and the chemtrails and shit. That's the real problem, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that that's what we're going to run into when we start learning more and more about the ley lines. It's like there's a process, you know, like we're saying, these secret societies, they know about this stuff, the all-present they. So what they do is they build dams and they build, you know, power plants and waste facilities and recycling centers and all these fucking big buildings that have a lot of static energy. And I think it either, if it doesn't demagnetize the ley line, it definitely diminishes the energy and maybe channels that energy into whatever they're doing. So I think that's part of what's, cool about looking into this stuff, and why I asked you guys about what you've learned about your area, because there's, weird stuff everywhere. I mean, I guarantee Pittsburgh's got Tartarian buildings, buildings that people are saying are Tartarian buildings, and
honestly,
that, even if it's not Tartarian, you can still be like, whoa, that's cool. Like we found this place in Ivoryton, Connecticut that had like a piano factory. And then you find out like, wow, there's all these elephant statues in this town because back in the, 1800s, they were shipping all these tusks, elephant tusks for the ivory, and then making pianos and selling those pianos. So it's like, even if that doesn't have to do with Tartaria, it's still interesting to know about,
Yeah, my girlfriend lives closer to the city than me, so I'm down there like every other day. And I'm always looking for the old style buildings with the copper rooftops that might be able to like harness electricity and stuff. And I'm like, should I just stop there and ask to see their basement and see if it has like underground levels and shit? And I haven't yet, but I think I'm going to start exploring these buildings more than I have,
Yeah. I mean, obviously the abandoned ones maybe would be easier to explore, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
I'll just say I'm a university student doing a architecture something or another and be can I look at your basement?
You look like a Carnegie Mellon kind of guy, so.
Right.
wear like an Amazon delivery vest and you can get into anything.
Yeah, really though. I got a delivery, third subfloor.
Yeah, man. I definitely took advantage of that when I was a delivery guy. There was Yale University. I got to explore a lot of that when I was delivering bread. And then there are some strange places in Hartford that I saw when I was delivering Amazon packages, like the Trinity College and like the UConn Science Laboratory. I got in there a couple times. So there's definitely, I would say, more to see than people would expect until you go look,
Right. I lived out in Utah for 4 years. I went to college out there, and I noticed, I looked up a ley line map before we went on the show, and I noticed Salt Lake is a huge hub of ley lines, and I never knew that before. And they also have some Tartarian buildings. Apparently the Salt Lake Temple has like 4 stories underground, and you're not allowed in a Mormon temple unless you've been cleared by their bishop or elder,
the Mormon committee of
honestly, like if you have premarital sex, you're not allowed to get married, you're not allowed to enter the building. Like it's insane. They have crazy amount of rules. But
it's a Freemason religion, it's like this country was started as an experiment, right? They experimented with all these different cultures and religions to see what would work best from the perspective of whoever's in charge, whoever can reap the rewards of the plantation workers. They literally call them plantations, and all over the United States you have places with this history that goes back. I mean, I would definitely look further into that, the Salt Lake City, the Mormons, and how they connect to where you're at right now, because there's definitely Mormons in Pennsylvania for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, as you continue to embark on your ley line adventures and journeys, wow, that was a slip up. Keep in touch and let us know what you find, because we're into that stuff, man. We want to get out on the road, hit the RV, and take the show on the road too.
Well, I mean, you guys, already kind of being so close to the Serpent Mound, get back over there.
Yeah, I know,
man. Baby.
I know.
See what's in between, because if it's the Serpent Mound is like this like whole hub, like maybe there's some mounds around it that haven't been totally demolished. One book I would recommend you guys get, because you're in this area, it's by Fritz Zimmerman.
Okay.
Fritz Zimmerman, and it's all about the Ohio River Valley mounds.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I think I have it over here.
We are dead center of the Ohio River Valley.
Yeah.
All right, you're going to love this. It's called The Nephilim Chronicles, a travel guide to ancient ruins in the Ohio Valley.
I am ordering that as soon as we hop off this call.
Yeah, that ties into the giants found in the area with all the burial mounds and everything. That's a deep rabbit hole.
Yes, it might be, a little bit of a trek because it is mostly focused around southern Ohio. But if you guys aren't too far from there in Pittsburgh,
Yeah,
then
we're
this
10
might
minutes
be
from the border. So
yeah,
we're right
Indiana too has a lot of mountains as well. And I've always thought, Indiana is a strange place. Indiana. It's just interesting that they would name the state that, and a lot to go into there that I still haven't even researched yet. But dude, this has been fun. Tyler, Mitch, thank you for
no doubt, bro.
joining me again.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. It's been great.
Yeah.
I hate to stop this amazing conversation we're having, but we do have to bounce here soon. And I thought we covered a lot of different topics. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, likewise, dude. No worries. I got to make some food. I'm hungry. I'm gonna make some next time.
I feel that. Well, finish that blunt first, and you'll be right on fire.
Wait. Do you want to plug your stuff for our listeners since we're going to share this?
Yeah, and then.
Yeah, My Family Thinks I'm Crazy is the podcast. Search it on any podcast app. I prefer if you use something other than Spotify, but it's up to you. And then same name, myfamilythinksimcrazy.com. The synchromistic exploration of the ever-expanding now that you heard about.
Love that.
Is only available on our Patreon, patreon.com/MFTIC. And I have a new podcast out with Michael Wan called Your Handbook for the Apocalypse. That comes out once a week.
I'll be sure to check that out.
Also, be on the lookout for Matrix Memoirs, which is another new podcast that my girlfriend is the host of.
You're about to be like Sam Tripoli having 10 shows.
Oh, dude, already.
Yeah, we're just down the rabbit hole with Mitch Vuk. Linktree/DTRH pod. That's the only link you need. It got our Twitters and everywhere you can listen to the show. And that's about it. All right, Mark. Appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Likewise.
Peace, brother.
Take it easy.
Much love.
Well, there you have it, rabbit holers. That was Mark Steves from the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast.
Apparently, he has 4 other podcasts now, too, so make sure you go. All the links will be in the show notes, and check all that out.
I thought it was a banging conversation, man. It's always an expanding of the mind when you talk to Mark Steves.
Yeah, he always seems to be on our exact wavelength. I love talking to the man. Take it away, Mulder.
There you go.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there. And no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Greetings, rabbit holers. Today we're going down the hole with Mark Palmer. He's the host of My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, which is a great podcast. I love listening to that. He just had Tommy Chong on for his 50th episode. It was awesome. He also created Alt Media United, which is an alternative media cooperative, and we are super happy and proud to be a part of that. We thank him a lot for letting us join that. Mark, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me here, guys. It's nice to meet you guys, and it's nice to be here jumping down the rabbit hole.
For sure, man. It's great to put a face to the name. I actually get to see you through this computer screen.
Likewise.
Yeah. So we start the show every time by asking what sent you down the rabbit hole, because everyone's trip down the rabbit hole of truth is different, and we like to explore different ways people jump into the truth or rabbit hole. So when did your family first think you're crazy?
Well, they've always thought I was crazy to some degree.
Right.
Because really, truthfully, this journey started for me from childhood. I've always been curious. I've always been interested in things that, weren't encouraged, I would say. Not that learning wasn't encouraged when I was a kid, but I was always interested in learning when other kids were like, oh, let's play kickball and stuff. So I was definitely a huge nerd for elementary school. Then middle school, I kind of got out of my shell and was like, oh yeah, I got to be a class clown and all this stuff. But really what happened with that was it led me into martial arts, because trying to like be, you know, more social and stuff, I got into some conflicts with the rougher kids, and I was a little rough myself, so I learned martial arts and dedicated a lot of time to it. And I think that facilitated the foundation, right? My curiosity, my love for learning, and then martial arts. And those three things all culminated and exploded when I smoked weed for the first time. Smoking weed like made me realize how much I had not seen about the world. Because at that point in my life, I was kind of anti-establishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was also anti-religion, which I didn't realize that I wasn't anti-spiritual. Like, I've always been spiritual, but for me, it took a while to see the difference. And so that was a big part of it. Like, smoking weed made me understand spirituality, and that bled into all the conspiracy stuff. Because like Sam says, I mean, he's been saying this a lot lately. Maybe I had something to do with it, but all conspiracy leads to spirituality, and,
yes,
and vice versa.
Yeah, we started saying that too. The bottom of the rabbit hole is spirituality. It's finding yourself, finding your purpose, and understanding that there's more to the world than just walking around and going to work and suffering every day.
So to answer your question real precisely then, yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. So to really wrap it all up in a bow, I've always felt like there was a deeper meaning to life that was worth seeking out. And it actually really was disheartening and not very encouraging when I found out how many people, at least in my immediate surrounding, didn't share that same, you know, questioning for life. And it wasn't until I found podcasts that I was like, oh, wow, there are people who are 10 times smarter than me talking about all these things.
Amen.
I'm like bothering my friends. They can barely make it through a conversation without, you know, telling me to shut the fuck up. You know?
Right. I get that completely. I tried. Most of my friends and my parents actually are very understanding of my conspiratorial mind and how deep I am. My grandparents are not. They think I'm a little crazy. You know, it's hard to explain things like Bitcoin and, you know, the global satanic pedophile cults. You know, you can't really explain that to them without them looking at you like you're fucking nuts.
You have to implant the information and let them discover it for themselves. But with that being said, I've brainwashed my family. They're completely down the rabbit hole, and it didn't take long to do it. So.
Well, you must be a confident teacher then, because I think that's a big part of it. And that's something I learned from David Way. Like, he was so confident and talking to me about Taoism and all the things he does. But when I asked him, you know, well, does your family practice this stuff with you? He's like, hell no, man. You know, like they do their own thing. And it is cool when you can like unite your family around one thing. I remember last summer I was milking cows on this farm. And one of the things that I really loved about working on that farm was the whole family was, you know, up and woke and not like believing any of this pandemic BS. And I'm using woke in the real sense of the word, not the, you know, we know. But that was so encouraging to be on a farm full of people who all saw this, you know, because my family's not like that. You know, they're not completely bending over backwards, but when it comes to being rule followers, I think the majority of the people I am related to tend to follow the rules more than question things for themselves and question authority.
Mm-hmm. I got it, man. We got to drop truth into our family and friends a little bit at a time, and maybe they'll absorb some of it, not all of it, and gradually, like you said, get woke or whatever the terminology is nowadays.
The original term.
Right. But you were talking about the first time you smoked weed was really a game changer for you. And I know the original logo for your podcast was you with a blunt in your mouth. And I'm a blunt guy, man. That's mad respect for me. Tyler's always over here drinking beers, and I'm taking the hit from the blunt while we're doing these shows. And marijuana and psychedelics can definitely open doorways to different things. But I think it was Carl Jung that said only you have to earn the wisdom. So you can't just go into these things, all these psychedelics and different drugs. No worries.
So what are we getting into there?
You're talking about blunts, and I'm fucking with you, dude. I could go on 30 minutes about blunts because, listen, when I had this moment of inspiration, right, it was smoking weed that kind of pushed this along, but it was the introspective dimension of weed, right? And that pushed me further and further. And I was smoking all kinds of shitty blunts back then. But when I met my first mentor, my first spiritual mentor, he taught me about the real value of tobacco. So I'm like, okay, this is not just something that the cigarette companies are poisoning. This is something that's valuable that they're poisoning because they don't want us to have the organic version of it. So that kind of got me going. And yeah, tobacco, I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. It's not healthy, but
definitely not the cigarettes that they have
either.
Like,
what's that?
If you're smoking like menthol cigarettes with all those different chemicals and shit, that's poison. But
the hell with that.
I agree with you. Like raw tobacco could have some benefits to it. It's not.
And, well, here's the real deal. I mean, people have been smoking tobacco for thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
You know, cancer is as new as GMOs and Monsanto.
Correct.
So, you know, we can see the very obvious correlation there. That's why, personally, you know, we have to be able to. I was just talking to my girlfriend about this yesterday because we were like talking about American spirits, like, oh, should we smoke it? It's organic. Can we trust them? And it's like, you know, until we get to the point where we can grow our own tobacco, yeah, maybe we're going to trust these companies that, who knows, they might not have our best interests in mind. But I've always loved backwoods because they're unprocessed. And what I mean by that is, like, take a look. I don't know if you guys put the video out, but you'll see this, and maybe the listeners will see this if you do put the video out. But when you have a backwoods, it's a leaf. It's a straight up leaf. This is the leaf that grew out of the ground, and then they cut it into this shape. And maybe they put something on it. I doubt it, because I get the original flavored ones, so there's no like fruits. But honestly, how this relates is tobacco is a masculine energy plant. Cannabis is a feminine energy plant. When you roll them together and smoke them,
you get the duality.
Yang effect, man. You're getting something that's truly powerful. And Amos, you know, with all of his wisdom, he told me that, yeah, man, I mean, cannabis has been in the Americas for thousands of years before the Spanish came, before all these people came. So, I mean, they've been rolling blunts in America for a long-ass time, guys. It's a tradition. Let's get with it. And I think that when I started smoking blunts and honestly treating tobacco as a sacrament, it added value to my spiritual perspective, and it added focus and concentration to my meditations. And I always smoke when I drive, because I believe that driving puts you in an altered state of consciousness, which, you know, accesses that part of your brain, the left brain thinking, because you're, you know, I don't know if I'm getting right and left correct, but whichever brain is focusing on driving, the other side of your brain is focusing on learning at a hyper pace. So podcasting, driving, and smoking blunts, that's my magic alchemy.
Dude,
right there.
This guy is speaking my language. It's like I'm seeing myself in them. And I'm glad you're speaking so highly of blunts, because some of my other weed-friendly friends talk shit. They're like, why don't you smoke bongs? It's so much cleaner and stuff. And I'm like, it's just not the same effect for me. It's like, you
gotta also consider that, like, you are smoking a plant at a temperature with a lighter that might be removing some of its beneficial qualities, right?
That's
so
true.
Every time you hit a bowl or a bong, you're roasting that shit directly to the flame. Whereas a blunt, the temperature,
it's slower. It's a lower burn.
Slowly nail it. You keep that cherry burning. You know that it's an intimate thing. I'm not going to sit here and act like some hipster and tell people, oh, if you're not smoking blunts,
right?
But you know, Mitch, you respect that, I believe, because you fucking sensed it too. You've experienced it too. So if anyone's interested, give it a shot. I love it.
I roll up games because, like backwoods, they're a little more like leafy rather than that processed thing you're getting from a swisher, but they're still not. I get it. They're not as good as backwoods, but I was down in North Carolina this past weekend for a board game tournament, and we were driving by tobacco plants growing out of the ground, and I stopped and I was like, go grab one of those. We'll roll it up tonight, but we didn't. But it was wild seeing the tobacco farms growing all that.
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, as a matter of fact, Connecticut, where I live, the first process that was ever commercially sold
from Connecticut, and we have this place called Tobacco Valley in the northern part of Connecticut where it was first settled. So yeah, tobacco's pretty, it's a crop that has a lot of history in this world, and especially in this continent. But I think there's something spiritual about it. I think all plants have a medicine to offer us, some more severe than others. And sometimes there's a lot of side effects to not being responsible with your engagement of the plant medicine, right?
Absolutely.
You could overuse these things and then they don't become medicinal, right? That's the key, is to be responsible and let them act as an empowering agent rather than disempowering yourself by saying, oh, I'm nothing without getting high, or I'm nothing if I don't have my drink,
Right.
Because don't get it twisted.
Don't let it
Alcohol,
control you. Yeah.
Alcohol's plant medicine too. I mean, you're getting
In moderation, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's concentrated, it's alchemized, but what we're talking about here comes from a plant. You can't separate it any further. So, alcohol, it's industrial product, but it comes from plants, the fermentation process, and there's varieties of it. But I think that people got just as much spiritual value back in the day from a good organic beer as opposed to like smoking some pot, because it was organic, it was natural. Nowadays you get like a Coors Light, that thing's full of like filtered fluoride water.
Right.
It's not good for you. So it's not that beer and alcohol is bad, it's the process, it's the industrialization that's made these plant medicines more concentrated and easier to abuse.
So on the topic of beer, did you ever hear anything about back before they were fermenting plants to make alcoholic beverages, that they used to ferment psychedelic mushrooms, and that used to be how they used to drink beer?
Really?
You've never heard anything about that? Yeah, it was a practice that started in Europe.
Like fly agaric mushrooms being, fermented into a brew, and that's something like the shamans in the Lapland and Siberia do. But I never heard of the psilocybin mushroom being used in that way. No, but that's definitely, I don't doubt it. I think that's really compelling.
That was probably more of a ritualistic experience rather than an everyday drink. But monks have been brewing beers and wines for thousands of years. Some of the oldest styles of wine have come from monks doing it the same way for thousands of years. It's an old practice that, modern day we kind of corrupted a little bit with our mass production processing ways, but at its base it can be a good thing in moderation without a doubt.
And absolutely. I think, the one part where I might go a little out of the traditional camp when we're talking plant medicines is like, I'm very suspicious of DMT. I trust ayahuasca. I think ayahuasca is interesting, but I don't know, if it's being used responsibly or in the ritual way that it was intended.
I think the same way kind of with shrooms versus acid. Like I trust the shroom, I don't trust acid because it's made in a lab, it's man-made, it's probably just it would be like smoking spice instead of weed. Like it's just not the right thing.
Well, I would disagree with you because there's and this is no slight to you.
No.
But this is there's some LSA that occurs naturally in morning glory seeds, which the indigenous people here in Americas were using to have psychedelic experiences. And LSD is just, it comes from ergotamine, which is a naturally occurring thing. So it's not completely
right, but it's still going through that processing phase, and that's where it gets a little worse in my mind than shrooms. But
well, similar to DMT, how when you drink it in the form of ayahuasca, you have to boil it down so that the root adds like an enzyme, if I'm not mistaken. Is the same process need to be applied for the LSA and LSD that naturally occurs in plants, or can you just pick up a morning glory and eat the seeds and trip?
No, you're talking about what's called an MEOI
inhibitor,
right? So that's what causes your liver to accept the DMT in a way that your immune system and your gut would normally reject it. Okay. Now, whether or not that's the case for LSD, I believe the whole idea of the state that you engage with it is like liquid. It will
kind of come through your pores or your blood vessels and seep in that way. That might be it, but I'm not a chemist, man. I don't know. But I do think that, like, when we say certain things are chemical and certain things are natural, it's almost like it's a little bit of a difference, like in concentration,
right?
Whether something's organic or not, because everything's organic, man. We're all, other than the chemicals, toxins, they're organic, they're just not good for us, so everything comes from the earth to a certain degree. It's when we process and concentrate things down to their toxic parts, it becomes really bad.
Well, one thing I hear you talk a lot about on your live streams and podcasts is synchronicity, and it's one thing that I'm really into. Whenever I feel like I'm getting a sign from the universe, I follow it, and a lot of people don't even know what the word synchronicity means. And would you like to explain it for them and talk about the importance of following the universal path?
Wow. That's a challenge, man.
Yeah, it's a deep question, but
no, it's not anything I can't take on. I would ask people to, if they would, imagine the first time you ever had deja vu. Okay, and remember that feeling of outside of your consciousness, right? Because for most people, I think you have this inner world that becomes obvious around your teenage years, right? When you're a kid, everything kind of fits together as far as consciousness goes. You're from one experience to the next. The people that you know and love are pretty close to you. But as you get older, you start to make friends who you don't see as much. That consciousness, the separateness of everything kind of comes into play. And I think deja vu is a slight reminder of that wholeness that we are when we're children and we're connected to everything. And time doesn't exist in the same way it does after you have that adolescent awakening of consciousness. And then where this fits in even deeper, because deja vu is like a feeling. It's like the basis for synchronicity, in my opinion, my perspective. It's not really an opinion. Synchronicity is the universe, to put this super like plain, is the universe vibrating to you in a way that reveals your true purpose. So you as a human being chose to come into this world with a purpose in mind. And it's like you're being tested almost. Like if you don't make the right choices, you might not end up in that purpose that you chose, and then it might take another life to get there, right? This is kind of, again, my spiritual perspective, not really based in anything other than intuition and research of other spiritual thinkers. But yeah, I think synchronicity is like a key or a sign or a clue when you're on your path. And when you start to become aware of them, you start to recognize what their function is. And it's just like I said, it's an indicator.
It's a little nudge in the right direction from...
Yeah, well, it depends on your purpose, though, too, because it's just very intimate and personal. That's why when you asked me, I almost felt like I couldn't answer it, but I can. And thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity, because one thing that I've set as an intention is to show people how synchronicity can become an active force in their life the same way it has mine. So... for those who don't know, I book guests for Tinfoil Hat, Sam Tripoli. And that all happened to me in such a synchronistic way. I'm not an agent, I've never been to California. I barely even learned anything about entertainment. But because I intimately knew this genre of podcasting, because it's such a huge passion of mine and a thing to research, and it's so important to me. Like the audio learning format has accelerated my consciousness so much. So long story short, Sam gave me this beautiful opportunity to work with him, and it was really a synchronistic event. And what I'm starting to understand is the more I separate myself from the traditional matrix, meaning I don't have a traditional job. I'm living by basically what I get paid from the various people I work for, that I've made those connections just like this, like we're talking here.
Right.
And that's all very synchronistic. And I think that there is a way for people to accelerate that factor in their lives. And that's the experiment I'm undergoing right now. It's called the Synchro Mystic Experiment in the Ever Expanding Now. And the plan is to record a story. The story is unfolding in my life right now. And as the story progresses, we're going to release episodes. And I hope that the hope is that people will see sides of my personal life, not for the sense of like, oh, look at Mark, he's so interesting, but so that they can take things that are happening to me in my life and then apply it to their own life, So it will be interesting. You might learn a few things about my adventures, but that's not the goal. I don't want, that to be the content. I want it to be how the synchronicity is accelerating my journey and expanding this process of knowing and learning, because I never, felt like I was an expert at anything, but that's why Sam hired me, because I knew who all the experts were.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like, hey, dude, you got to have this guy on. You got to have this guy on. This guy's really smart. And that's what when I go on podcasts, I always, if I'm talking about a particular subject, I try to tell people who I learned about this stuff from. Like,
Right.
for instance, right now, everything I'm talking about was hugely inspired by Michael Wan. So I had Michael Wan on my podcast before any of this really unfolded in a major way. And him and we hit it off.
He's
we hit
the
it off.
Susquehanna Alchemy guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've listened to his
Alchemist.
stuff. Yeah.
So Mike is a really cool guy. And, I gave him the opportunity to be on Tinfoil Hat a couple times. So I was like, you know what, let me ask him to be on my show. Not that far of a stretch. We're doing pretty well. So I have him on my show, and, he's like showing me this wand that he made, like a real deal magic wand, because
Magic
I'm into
fucking
that
wand.
shit. I make, all kinds of cool stuff like that, art and
Yeah.
crystals and things like that in a personal way. I'm not like promoting an Etsy or something like that. It's all for myself. And Mike showed me his wand. So I'm like, hey, dude, check this out. I showed him mine, and then one thing led to another, and I'm like, at his place in Pennsylvania. We've been friends ever since in this kind of professional but also really authentic way, because it's a job for a lot of us doing this podcasting thing. It's a hobby, it's a job. A lot of people want it to be a career, like me, not quite there yet, but I'm on my way to it.
We'd like that also.
We're at the hobby level.
Yeah. So, but you get what I mean. Like,
Yes.
you put certain time into this, and then there's a camaraderie, right? Like us
Yeah.
talking right here. This
Build a
isn't
community.
the only time. I'm going to invite you guys on my show. I'm sure
Right.
you guys, if you're kind enough, would have me back on. And this is
Absolutely.
the kind of real, authentic relationship that's built using these matrix tools that are normally holding most people back, right? So we're
Right.
taking the matrix back, fuckers. Let's fucking do this. And I'm sorry I'm cursing so much, but it
No, we
pumps
swear
me
all the
up,
time.
Let's do
The
this.
revolution will be podcasted.
Good.
So I was just wondering, as you go along your spiritual synchronistic journey, do you have any tips you can give people who are out there looking to find their purpose? Because there are a lot of lost souls out there, people who just have no idea what they're doing, and in my opinion, it's the cause of the epidemic of anxiety and depression that we have in the country and in the world.
That's because people are living in the future or living in the past. If they're depressed, it's past, and anxious, it's future. People got to live in the now, like Mark is.
Yeah, but it's more than that, and I appreciate you and saying that, because you're absolutely right. But I also appreciate you giving me an opportunity to answer that question, because I am always on the lookout for those answers myself, because I want to improve my life. I don't come from, I'm from Connecticut. Oh, you've probably heard there's a bunch of rich people here. Well, guess what? I'm not one of them, So I've always had a feeling of there's a pressure on me to make something of myself. And I've always loved helping people, teaching people. I used to teach martial arts classes. I'm a black belt in I would call it American martial arts, but really it's a combination of things. Awesome. But yeah, that's where that came from. So my advice to people is you have to start with yourself. If you don't love yourself, that's the first thing. And that goes into relationships, that goes into family, that goes into career. You have to love yourself. And if you can't, why? Ask why and figure that out, because there are things holding that back that you can get down to the bottom of and open up this thing called your magnetic heart. Because that's where it all starts. Your chakra system has 7 points. Where's the middle point? It's the fourth one in the middle, your heart.
Right. That's actually one of the reasons I started this podcast. I've always had a lot of trouble with my throat chakra, public speaking, lying, stuff like that. And this podcast has helped me work through that, become a better speaker, and be able to talk to people truthfully and honestly, face to face, you know? And it's all about learning what your defaults, like what you're good at, what you're not good at, and fixing those things.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's, I would say, don't be afraid to be critical with yourself, because who else is gonna be? Like, don't be afraid to be hard on yourself. You should be the hardest one on yourself. I think that
you should be your worst critic.
Born like that, but you should be, striving for improvement. I think if you have just that, you're great, and the information will come to you, because my journey is way different than yours, even though we're into a lot of different things,
right?
And there's people out there who aren't into any of this stuff, whose journey is completely different, but we can all improve ourselves, right? And through improving ourselves, we improve the whole. So synchronistically, when you start to improve yourself, the universe is going to offer more opportunities to continue that growth. That's where you start to notice the synchronicity. Right. So one tip that I have is to be playful, okay? Because the universe is a game. Life is a game. Life is even an illusion. Yeah. So if life is
a lot of people say that,
why don't you pick what kind of illusion it is?
Right. Make your own reality.
There is a lot to that, because we all know those guys that are happy-go-lucky, and it just seems like they can do no wrong. Like, nothing goes wrong for these guys, and they just float through life enjoying it, and they magnetically attract everything that they want in their life. It's crazy.
But yeah, I think that improving yourself is the foundation of it, and being playful and not taking yourself too seriously. Like I said, be hard on yourself when it comes to being honest. But don't take life seriously enough that it's not a game anymore, because that's the fun of it. Improving yourself can be fun. So that's kind of where the synchronistic experiment, or the synchromistic experiment we're expanding now, is really developing. Because I think through my journey of self-improvement, our journey of self-improvement, we can inspire other people to improve themselves in this really radical way, in a way that, isn't available. You can go get run-of-the-mill relationship life advice anywhere, but this is fine-tuned to people who see the matrix for what it is and want to overcome the matrix.
We have had a great time getting to know everyone in this truther community. It's really a tight-knit group. Some people, fight between each other's, whether one conspiracy is right or the other, but we all are very loving and kind, and just want everyone to do well.
Yeah, there's plenty to go around in this community.
Yeah, no, and that's what's so cool about podcasting is it's not competitive, we can all have 1,000 people, 10,000, 100,000 people that support us, and that doesn't interfere with anyone else being supported, because, I only put 3 hours out of content a week. There's a lot more hours in a week for you can, listen to other shows too. So I don't think there's any competition, and that's what makes it so fun, joining you guys on this show and having you guys on my show eventually, because we just keep adding to this conversation.
Exactly. It's all about the conversation.
So you mentioned like how we're communicating over this digital platform. That's one of the tools that the Matrix provides for us to help pursue our purpose and spread knowledge and help other people. But do you think that there are things put in this matrix that are used as roadblocks by the powers that be?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who will, give 95% truth, because that 5% truth is the cul-de-sac at the, right before the last stop at the, the gold. you get diverted right at that last exit, and you never figure out the real reason you were all heading down that road. So I definitely think you have to be trusting yourself first, and that's why I recommend start with your heart. Tune your magnetic heart, because that's your intuition. That's going to tell you whether or not you can trust the people that you're learning these things from. I mean, you should listen to your heart first.
Absolutely.
I'm all about that. Mark, before we ask you the last couple questions, do you want to tell the people where they can find you and all your work?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a cool opportunity. MyFamilyThinksI'mCrazy.com is the place.
There it
is.
is.
If you really want to get the deep cuts and the real info, it's patreon.com/MFTIC. That's where the synchromistic experiment in the ever-expanding now is taking place for now, under construction. Things are kind of in the works, but we do have big plans for that. But yeah, thanks for letting me do that.
It's all about the journey, not the destination, right? All right, one thing I wanted to ask you is if you had one or two book recommendations for someone that was just getting into like the truther or conspiratorial realm, what would be the top of your list?
Well, as you could see, I got a lot to pick from. So my favorite book of all time is The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. Not for any particular reason other than it was like the book that expanded my mind at a key point in my life. And the other book that did that for me is The Teachings of Don Juan Ayaki Way by Carlos Castaneda. So my book recommendation is not those books. Why I bring that up is because those books were what I needed at that point in my journey, and those books will always mean so much to me because of that. So my advice to people is, again, follow your heart, because your heart is going to show you that book that's perfect for you. Now, if somebody wants like a general, how-to guide on a lot of this stuff, The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall is probably one of the most all-encompassing books. He covers a lot that you can learn more about through all these, different podcasts that I love. But I would recommend people listen to podcasts more than read books.
If books aren't your game, podcasts are definitely the way to go if you're not a big reader. The book that
also, it's a more active way to learn. I've found.
Yeah.
At least maybe that's just how I am. But I think like being able to keep your body doing something while you're listening to something, it just helps memorize for whatever reason.
Yeah, back when I had my 9-to-5 job, I would always just have an earphone in, listening to them. And like you said, I'm a big driving and listening to podcast guy. The book that kind of set me in the right path at the right time was The Ancient Secret to the Flower of Life by Drunvalo Melchizedek. It has a lot of it got all kinds of shit.
Yeah, see, now this is something that highlights my point, because that's a book that I've never got, despite the fact that it's come into my life so many times, and I've had that feeling of like, I should get that. So that was me not listening to my intuition, and maybe here's the universe giving me, another sign,
another little nudge. It's pretty good. It has about 80% of really great hard-hitting info, and then a little 20% that's a little out there iffy, but still, it's worth the read.
He takes that last name Melchizedek
or whatever. Yeah,
that's like is that an ascended master or a channeled being?
It's like the universal school of ascended master. It's the Melchizedek college or whatever. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm into that stuff. I think there's definitely a fifth dimensional consciousness that's speaking to us in this realm through certain people. Channeled material. Definitely, again, use your heart, use your intuition, because it's not all the same, but I don't discount it. I have a couple books back here from Channeled Beings, and the Law of Attraction material from Esther Hicks was a huge part of building the foundation for what I now apply to my life, and I've applied it in a way that is very synchronistic. That's why it's not hard for me to explain synchronicities, but it's not easy to give a concise definition of it.
It's hard to put into exact words, for sure.
And it means something for everybody in a way, too. It's a very intimate thing, synchronicities.
Without a doubt. Do you have anything before we wrap up?
No, man, we just got to do it again. I look forward to getting back on here and talking about some more things that are, like, some things that are currently going on in our world. I want to get your opinion on a lot of that whenever we have some more time, but we'll definitely have to do it again.
Yeah, Mark, thank you very much for giving us some of your time. We'll get sent down the whole another route next time.
Yeah, definitely willing to come back and go into the Manly P. Hall stuff deeper.
For sure.
Anything else you guys want to talk about, I'm game. Let's do it.
Hell yeah. Well, have a good night, brother. We'll,
see you later, man.
Likewise.
Take a puff of that backwood for me.
Oh, yeah. We'll do it.
All right. Peace, brother.
Peace.
Well, there you have it, rabbit holers. That was Mark Palmer Steves. We got into synchronicities, finding your purpose in life, which I personally think is the most important thing we can talk about. We talked about book recommendations, weed, blunts,
psychedelics, all kinds of good stuff.
You name it.
I hope you liked it as much as I did. We'll definitely have them on again. And that should do it for now.
Take it away.